Well, there's a lot of traffic up there in that
Yes.
area anyway.
Yes.
So I can imagine with them doing all this
I
stuff.
was just curious if, since I'm
Well,
pretty
make sure
sure
you
we're
brought
going
that
to
up
talk to John about the
I
draft.
like to ask John the impact of bringing the draft to Philadelphia, with people complaining a little bit about it. What is the impact of having the draft in Philly?
Well, for the city, it projects them as big time. But I understand the local residents. I understand why they're upset, because it is going to be an extraordinary headache. We're less than 3 weeks out. I'm still trying to figure out how the heck I'm going to get in there. I'm thinking about contacting the military to find a way to get us in there. But so it is a headache for the people that have to be in that area. But it was a similar thing to when the Democratic National Convention was here at Wells Fargo Center. Same type of thing. When you have these major events, just the reality of the world we're in right now. You have to have a lot of security. You have to shut things down, and that's an unfortunate part of it. But we'll get through it, and it is big for the city.
Yeah, and, obviously the draft about 14 days away. Well, 2 weeks from today.
Philadelphia, a passionate football town, and it will serve as a tremendous backdrop for the draft and provide a great atmosphere for our fans and incoming players. Jeffrey Lurie, a strong advocate in support of the draft on behalf of the city of Philadelphia. Those are the empty words from NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell.
Empty. That's harsh, Pete. Maybe he meant them. You never know.
Well, we know that the draft coming to Philadelphia, we know a lot about the draft starting to heat up here. We have our NFL news and notes. You just wrote over at 973ESPN.com about how the experts believe building around Wentz should be the Eagles' top priority. Does that suggest then that they should get an offensive player at number 14?
Yeah, and that's what Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks, the two NFL Network draft analysts, two of their draft analysts, had their annual pre-draft conference call this week, and they were both asked about what the Eagles should do and kind of agreed that despite the chasm that is the cornerback position on this team, the better way to go would be to continue to build up around Carson Wentz. So both of them kind of felt that way and think that's the way the Eagles are moving in that direction. And certainly Howie Roseman has intimated that on more than one occasion. And if you look at 14 overall, there's probably 4 players you could really narrow it down to if you assume they're going offense. And to me, it would be the 2 wide receivers, Corey Davis and John Ross, and the 2 running backs, Christian McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook. So I think those are the 4 players you can kind of center in on. Daniel Jeremiah mentioned Mike Williams, but I don't think he's a fit here because I think he's sort of a redundancy as a lengthy big receiver when you have Alshon Jeffrey, who's a proven commodity. I think those 2 players are too similar physically. So I don't think he's in the equation.
John, Dalvin Cook has kind of indicated that the Eagles are showing some interest in him. He's kind of sounding like he has interest in Philadelphia. So 14, Dalvin Cook, signed, sealed, deliver it?
I wouldn't go that far. There's, he's one of those guys that people have going all over the board, as high as 14 to the Eagles, and some people have him dropping into the second round because he didn't exactly wow people at the scouting combine. And there's some talk that he just isn't physically gifted enough to be a star in this league. So that's one where the Eagles have to do their homework. They have to decide, is he the type of player they want at the running back position? And sure, they could pull the trigger, but I certainly wouldn't say signed, sealed, and delivered at this point.
So, John, Christian McCaffrey's name continues to be linked to the Philadelphia Eagles. Dalvin Cook says the Eagles have interest. Who do you like more in Philly green, Cook or McCaffrey?
Yeah, me, no questions, McCaffrey. I just think I mentioned to Mike yesterday, I think he's the best offensive player in this draft because he can do so many different things. and he's so versatile. He's just such a unique player with a rare skill set. And considering the way Doug Peterson likes to run his offense, he likes to use a lot of formations. He likes to move people around. And that becomes so much easier if you have a player like McCaffrey, because you don't have to worry about situational substitutions, because you can move them all over the field, and the opposing defense has got to play that sort of Where's Waldo game and figure out where he is if you're smart. So I think he's a perfect fit. Similar to Cook, though, he's got his deficiencies, and he's not a home run either, because he's not the biggest guy in the world. He's not the most physical guy in the world, but he sure is explosive, and I think he would be a tremendous fit for this team.
How about there's some news, the Eagles worked out Missouri defensive end Charles Harris. Haven't heard a lot of his name, but projected first-round pick, 9 sacks, 12 tackles for losses. You know, here's an impact type of player, defensive end pass rusher there. We're talking about needing to get around Carson Wentz, but is Charles Harris a legit possibility?
Yeah, he is. I mean, that's another position where the Eagles have a need. But that as a whole, if you look at this draft, I think that's one of those positions, and Harris is the guy who's been moving up the boards in recent weeks. But I think it's more from a case that there aren't really many great edge rushers in this draft, and that's a position arguably that's the second most important one in the NFL behind quarterback, because scouts will tell you there's two ways to win in this league. You get the quarterback or get to the quarterback, one or the other. And because there's such a lack of edge rushers in this particular draft, I think certain guys are being pushed up the board, and that's how I define Harris. I just don't think it's value at number 14 overall.
John, the secondary, a big concern for the Eagles, maybe the biggest concern the Eagles have. If they don't lock down their man in round 1, do they have to go corner in round 2?
Yes, and maybe 3 also. I mean, yeah.
Possibly 4 as well.
Yeah, I mean, they need to add multiple bodies at the position in the draft, but they don't have to do it in the first round. That position, unlike defensive end, unlike edge rusher, is very deep, and you could get good players in the second and even third and fourth rounds. Now, they're not going to be superstar players, but they can help you. And one thing Jim Schwartz does well is he can play zone defenses. He can mix that in, and he can kind of mask a deficiency out on the edge of the defense at times. So I think the Eagles will look at that and say, we're going to give you bodies, but they're not going to be top-tier, number 1, 14th overall pick type of guy. He's going to have to make do with a second-round pick or a third-round pick.
Hey, John, a couple of questions regarding the current roster. Number 1, Mychal Kendricks. Do you see him on the team come September?
I don't think so. I think they want to trade him. They probably want to trade him during the draft. The question is, how much are you going to get back for him? I don't think much, but considering what the way the Eagles used Mychal Kendricks last year, he barely played. So there's no need to keep him on this roster at the number he's set to make. So if you can get even a 7th-round pick, a 6th, hopefully with a conditional that can move up to 6 or 5 if he plays in another city, I think you have to do it because he's just not going to play on this team.
John, also, any other guys that you think are still potential cap casualties? They're still sitting right near the ceiling there. They're probably going to have to do something, right? I mean, they're going to be able to go into the season without releasing another veteran, big name player.
No, they're going to have to do something just to create space to sign their rookie class. They're going to need money for that. So, but that's where the trades come in. And as I said, I do believe they'll move Kendricks, and there's still a potential that Jason Kelce is moved. If by some strange twist of fate they can't trade either or both of those players, then, yeah, I mean, somebody somewhere has got to be cut to create some space, or, as Howie is wont to do and has already done numerous times, somebody could get restructured, a veteran player, and they could move money around that way. But they're certainly going to have to create some space to sign their rookie class.
Jason Kelce, maybe, for example, is a target of somebody that has a contract that if they release him after June 1st, it's a savings, or is there another candidate? Like, if I said John McMullen, who's the most likely guy to get released?
Well, I think Kendricks and Kelce are likely to be traded. I think both of them could be traded and could be traded during draft weekend. Kendricks more so. But even Kelce, if you look at what the Eagles did in free agency on the offensive line, I mean, they're just bloated on the interior. They have so many options. They bring in Chance Warmack. They re-signed Stefan Wisniewski. And remember, that was a 3-year deal, so that's a clear indication he's going to be around. They want Isaac Seumalo to be a starter. That could be a guard. That could be at center. So at some point, something's got to give. You can't have all these bodies. Technically, you know, Warmack is a 1-year prove-it deal, so they could cut him. That's not that big of a deal. But clearly, they sort of see something in him and hope he can develop into what he was expected to be when he was a top 10 pick. So I think they're trying to move Jason Kelce, and I think that's still a significant possibility.
Interesting because, it seems that somebody else is going to have to go. If you think they're going to go in with all these guys in place, that seems a little far-fetched.
Well, yeah, it's impossible, really, if you think about it. I mean, if you talk about center and left guard and add up the people that are here, it's Jason Kelce, it's Alan Barber, it's Isaac Seumalo, it's Stefan Wisniewski, it's Chance Warmack. You don't need 5 guys for those 2 positions. So all 5 of them aren't going to be here on the final 53.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN. Of course, FanRag Sports NFL, National NFL Columnist. Let's take a look at some of the NFL news and notes here. One, your thoughts on Jonathan Hankins heading to the Colts here. Big move for Indianapolis, but maybe a bigger loss for the Giants.
Well, it's a bigger move for Jonathan Hankins to get that much money this late in free agency. It usually doesn't happen. So he's one of the rare guys who waited and waited and waited and still got paid and got a significant contract. But there's no question Chris Ballard, the new GM there, has done a very good job. And they're starting to rebuild that front 7. He's a good player. They probably had to overpay, but that's the nature of free agency. If good players get the free agency, they tend to get overpaid a little bit. And the Giants will miss them, but they still have a very, very talented defensive line, and they kind of thought they were going to lose him, so it's not like they're taken by surprise that he went elsewhere.
John, some sad news coming out of the NFL today is Dan Rooney has passed away. What was his legacy in your mind with the Steelers, and what did he bring to the game?
Well, I think, first of all, the Steelers are one of those marquee organizations, number one, and everyone looks at them as sort of, we always mock that term gold standard that Jeffrey Lurie said. If it's, if you were to rate the organizations, certainly New England's at the top, but Pittsburgh would be right there as sort of the organization everybody tries to emulate. And I think it starts with continuity. If you think about basically Chuck Noll, I think, got there in 1967 or 1968, and they've had 3 head coaches, and all of them have won Super Bowls. So I think everyone looks at the way they do things and try to emulate it, and then you have to talk about the Rooney Rule and trying to advance minorities into high-profile positions in the NFL, and he's had a lot of success doing it.
And then the news also comes out, John, and you wrote about this on 97.3ESPN.com about Tom Modric this week, too. He sort of helped launch the Andy Reid era with the Eagles and then got caught up in that power struggle with Jeffrey and Joe Banner at the time. But he was a really good talent evaluator, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think if you look at it and say that was the golden era for the Eagles, and if that could have stayed together with sort of Tom Modric running football operations and Andy Reid having a hand in it, if those guys could have worked together for, say, a 10-year period instead of essentially 3 years, I think 5 NFC championships it ultimately turned into, you probably have a Super Bowl championship or two. I think that was the apex of sort of player procurement for the Eagles when they were really, really good at it. And Tom was arguably, and I would argue, the biggest part of it.
John McMullen's with us here, of course, our NFL news and notes. Every day at this time on the Sports Bash, you can check John out on Twitter at JFMcMullen. Check him out with his national NFL coverage at FanRag Sports NFL. And, of course, all his Eagles news and notes is at 97.3ESPN.com. John, yay or nay, Marshawn Lynch will play in Vegas, or Oakland, I guess it would be, this year for the Raiders.
Oh, that's a yay. Yeah, I mean, that's where he wants to go, the nonsense with the Patriots. I think, Marshawn's contract is for $9 million, basically, because he retired with time left on his contract, and he remains the right of the Seahawks, and the Seahawks will certainly trade him and not blink an eye to the Raiders. But the Raiders don't want to pay him $9 million either, so to me, the last hurdle is, can they come to a renegotiated contract? And from Oakland's standpoint, to be honest, I don't think it makes a lot of sense from a football standpoint, because he's a 30-year-old guy. We know what that means at the running back position. I think people forget how bad he looked his final year in Seattle. They just think about the Beastquake runs and how good he once was. And being a year off, I don't think he's going to all of a sudden, find the fountain of youth. So I question it from a football standpoint. I wrote about that on FanRag today. I think a lot of it has to do with sort of smoothing over the divorce in Oakland, because he's Mr. Oakland. He's an Oakland guy. And if you think about the Raiders having to play as a lame duck there, it could get ugly quickly. And this smacks to me as sort of a PR move by the Raiders to kind of smooth things over.
John, another thing you wrote about real quick on this, Teddy Bridgewater, the Vikings decision on that fifth-year option, and they got a really tough decision there.
Yeah, they do. I mean, that was Aaron Donald got his fifth-year option, which earlier this week, which was the ultimate no-brainer because he's one of the best defensive linemen in football. And then when you talk about that draft class and you go up to 11 days before last year's regular season, the Vikings might have the second no-brainer. I mean, Teddy was on his way to being a star, and he crumples to the turf with that horrible injury. He's not going to play this year. He didn't play last year. So you're going to have to say to yourself, you pick up this fifth-year option and assume he's going to be the starting cornerback after missing 2 consecutive seasons. I don't know if that's possible. And then you have Sam Bradford in the equation. Sam's in the final year of his deal that he signed with the Eagles. He played very well last season. And the one thing about playing that position in the NFL, Sam holds all the cards. If he plays well, it's his job. It's as simple as that. Mm-hmm. Now, but we've said time and time again with Sam Bradford, if this, if that, and he's never really had tremendous success. He'll get one more opportunity to prove he could be the guy. And if he plays well and gets the Vikings to the playoffs, he'll be the starting quarterback in Minnesota moving forward.
Indigo, John. We figured out, I did a little research there while you were talking. You, me, and Mike, we're all going to get these bike sharing things where you just stick your credit card in and then get the bike. And then the three of us are going to wheel up there like, I don't know, Lance Armstrong and some of those Tour de France guys. Where that's how we're going to get there.
I think I'm just going to start walking right now. Maybe I'll make it by the time.
I figure we just pile into a car like a clown car. We all just start like falling out with the door not even shut. Like you're holding onto the door. You know, there'll be like 6 of us up there. We hope anyway. We're still efforting the NFL on that. All right, Sports Bash, John McMullen here every weekday with NFL news and notes. Of course, the draft 2 weeks from today. Listen to it all on 97.3 ESPN. John, take care, pal.
Hey, thank you, guys.